Today on the Bourbon Bytes Podcast, I highlight several upcoming whiskey releases that have my excitement levels off the charts, including the return of Knob Creek 12 Cask Strength, a special commemorative edition of Rittenhouse Rye, a new release of Penelope, and much more. Then I'm reviewing a brand new release from Copperworks Distilling, Kilt Lifter American Single Malt Whiskey. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bourbon Bytes Podcast. I'm your host, Clifton, and this is the week of Thursday, December 11th, 2025. I hope you're having a great week so far. I definitely am, because a lot of the whiskey news today that I'm going to be reporting on has me thrilled. So without further ado, I'm just going to jump right in it, because there are so many upcoming bottles that I'm excited for that I have to share with you guys. I may sprinkle in some video game news as well, but the whiskey is where it's at this week. Like I mentioned last week, we're towards the end of the year, so I feel like a lot of these brands are trying to rush out new releases. Now, these might be coming at the top of next year versus now. A lot of them we just have the TTB labels to refer to, but nevertheless, I am very, very excited for what we have in store. I think the one that you guys probably expect me to talk about the most is the announcement of the return of Knob Creek Cask Strength 12-year-old bourbon. So this was a limited release that came out a couple years ago alongside the regular 12-year-old 100 proof Knob Creek, but it was very, very limited. I never saw the Cask Strength variety here in Southern California. Fortunately, I did have a chance to try it at a friend's house when I was visiting them in Vegas, actually, a couple years ago. And all I can say is it absolutely lives up to the hype. It is just a delicious, well-aged, high-proof version of the Knob Creek we all know and love. Well, according to Coming Whiskey on Instagram, there is a new TTB label for it that's hitting the market hopefully soon. It's listed as 120 proof, so I'm not entirely sure if this is going to actually be cask strength or just capped at 120, kind of like the other single barrel selects are from Knob Creek. But either way, I'm extremely excited. I think the Knob Creek 12 100 proof is always one of my favorite bourbons. It's one that I always keep on my shelves no matter when or where I'm going. I just got to make sure I have a bottle of Knob Creek 12. And now knowing there might be a chance for me to get my hands on the cask strength version makes me incredibly excited. Now, Knob Creek hasn't necessarily announced anything about this yet. I'm just referring to the TTB label that was published, but hopefully we'll get some updates on this soon. The first time this came out was back in 2020, so maybe a good 5-year anniversary to bring it back. I will keep an eye out for it. If it's not available in Southern California, I might have to ask you guys to keep an eye out for it for me. But yeah, just wanted to shout that out. I am so excited for the return of that bourbon. Another TTB label coming from the Jim Beam Distillery was announced the same day. Again, thank you to Coming Whiskey on Instagram. This is a single barrel release of Old Grandad 114 proof at 7 years old. Now, I'm not entirely sure if this means that we're going to start getting some store picks of Old Grandad, but it does mean we're getting a 7-year-old 114 proof product that I'm hoping is a permanent addition to the lineup, because Old Grandad has always been one of the hidden budget gems on the Jim Beam lineup. I've been buying Old Grandad 114 since I still lived in South Carolina. That was one of the first high proof bourbons I ever bought. But getting it at a 7-year age statement makes me very, very excited. I'm hoping this means they might release an Old Overholt 114 at 7 years. I know there was an Old Overholt 114, and I think there was a different Old Overholt that was 7 years. But I think it would be great to see this and Old Overholt just being regular shelf staple additions. I think it elevates these budget-friendly brands to be more high-end and premium, and really just made for true lovers of good quality bourbon at an affordable price. Also coming soon from a beloved brand, Penelope is releasing their new Madagascar bourbon whiskey. So this is a bourbon that's finished in cognac casks as part of their Cooper series, and it's going to be released at 95 proof. Now, I am a little confused by the Madagascar name and the cognac finish. I don't really see cognac and Madagascar going together in any way, but I will say if it's anything like their other Cooper series releases, it's going to be a flavor punch, and usually a really, really good one. We also have an announcement of the new Blood Oath Pact number 12 release. Now, this one is finished in 2 different casks. I'm going to try to pronounce this first word, Montepulciano and Sangiovese casks. I'm familiar with Sangiovese. It's one of my favorite styles of red wine. But Montepulciano or Pulciano is a popular Italian red wine grape as well. It just must not have as popular of a hold here on the US, or at least the California wine market, because I've not really seen that. But both of those seem to be very flavorful red wine casks. Now, as with all Blood Oath releases, this is going to be bottled at 98.6 proof, hence the temperature of blood, kind of been their thing for a while. But yeah, this is going to be the 2026 release. I'm not sure when this is going to come out, but it sounds like a fantastic bourbon. Once I have an official announcement, I'll share more details, but I want to get you guys in the know as soon as I saw the label. Speaking of new labels, there are 3 more that I want to mention. Again, I don't usually just browse Coming Whiskey's page for upcoming releases, but there are so many that I'm so excited about that I have to tell you about it. The next of which is the new limited edition Remus Reserve bourbon. So previously they've been releasing the Babe Ruth Reserves. I think they've had 2 of those so far, but it looks like for next year they're going to be releasing a Lou Gehrig Reserve. So this is named after the baseball icon known as the Iron Horse, Lou Gehrig. And it features a medley of 4 distinctive mash bills inspired by his number 4 jersey. So these mash bills include a 2016 44% rye bourbon, a 2017 49% rye bourbon, a 2019 99% corn bourbon, and a 2019 36% rye bourbon. The most of which is the 49% rye, which is a very, very high rye bourbon that's in the blend from 2017. This one's going to be bottled at 109 proof, and there's only going to be 9,665 bottles available, one for each of his plate appearances. Now, as with the Babe Ruth Reserve, I'm sure there's going to be a hefty price tag that goes along with this, but I often see it on the shelves for a long time, and sometimes it even gets included on sales. Of course, all this delicious bourbon is coming to us from Ross and Squibb Distillery in Indiana, so we know the spirit itself is good, but this blend sounds very, very exciting. I'm going to keep an eye out for this one, as I always do. Now, I did see some questions in the comments whether or not this was actually going to go to support Lou Gehrig disease, or more commonly known as ALS. There's not been an official announcement for this whiskey. There's nothing on the bottle itself about that. But I have a feeling the folks over at Remus Reserve will probably do something in tribute to that. I would hope so, at least. But I'll let you know as soon as I get an official confirmation. Hey, we're still talking about Indiana spirit. So let's talk about the new Templeton Rye Double Oak. It is aged for 6 years old and then finished in a second set of virgin American oak barrels for an additional 10 months. This release is going to be bottled at 98 proof and is going to be a permanent addition to the Templeton Rye lineup as far as I'm aware. Templeton Rye kind of gets a bad rap because of some of its lower end offerings. Some of the younger ryes just aren't quite up to par, but I will say the Templeton 10-year rye is one of my favorites. It's honestly one of the best expressions of Indiana rye I've ever had, and at a great price too. If this is going to be priced somewhere, obviously below that at about, $80, $90, I could see this being a really successful addition to their lineup if it's around $50 to $60. I'll keep an eye out. I do love me a toasted or a double barrel rye whiskey, especially around the holidays. So not sure when this one's going to come out, but I'm going to keep an eye out because I'm very excited for what they do at Templeton. All right, last label that we're going to talk about is a new label for Rittenhouse Rye Whiskey. This is a Rittenhouse Rye Whiskey that commemorates the 250th anniversary of the United States. Of course, 2026 is going to be the 250th anniversary of the founding of the U.S. back in 1776, and they're releasing a special whiskey for it. And this one definitely caught my eye because, like I said, I love Templeton 10-year rye. Well, this is a 10-year-old bottled in bond straight rye whiskey from Heaven Hill. Remember, Pikesville's around 7 years old, so we're getting 3 additional years of age on a rye whiskey from Heaven Hill. I hope this is going to be a relatively available bottle. Again, they're commemorating, not something specific for the distillery, but the 250th anniversary of our country. I would hope this is going to be at least a nationwide release, maybe limited time, sure, but I cannot wait to get my hands on this. I love just standard Rittenhouse rye. I love Pikesville. I love Elijah Craig rye. Actually, I poured myself some Elijah Craig rye while I'm recording this podcast, just because I figured it was on brand with this announcement. But I can't wait. It's just one of my favorite. Other than Indiana rye, Heaven Hill's rye whiskey is one of my favorites out there. Definitely a bourbon lover's rye. And at 10 years old, I'm imagining this is going to be incredible. So once that hits the market, again, I'll give you guys an update. This is all kind of like a sneak peek at whiskeys coming out. Usually I wait till an official announcement, but like I said, I was perusing the Coming Whiskey Instagram page, and so many of these made my heart just race. So I had to mention them to you guys, just so you were aware of what's coming soon in the world of American whiskey. I do have one last piece of whiskey news before we move over to a little bit of gaming news. Of course, this is Whiskey Advocate's Whiskey of the Year. Spoiler alert if you've not seen it, but they've just announced their top whiskey. They've been slowly teasing it out with different ones every week, but they've just announced that their number one whiskey of the year is Elijah Craig Barrel Proof Rye Whiskey, batch A925. Remember, Elijah Craig is now releasing Barrel Proof Rye. This is the first and only release of it. Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to have a bottle of it. I usually get samples from Heaven Hill. I think I talked about this a few weeks back on the podcast, but I think they've either reduced their distribution list or I've somehow fall off it. I don't know the details, but I did not get a chance to try this year's C925 batch of the bourbon or this new A925 batch of the Barrel Proof Rye. Fortunately, a friend to the podcast and the channel, Perry from This Is My Bourbon Podcast, brought a bottle of it to its Bourbon Night meetup a couple weeks ago, and I had a chance to try it. And I will say, it is an incredible Cask Strength rye whiskey. This first release comes in at 12 years, 3 months old. So again, I was just praising the Heaven Hill Rye Whiskey Mashbill. This one's even older than that Rittenhouse 10-year that was just filed the TTB label, but at Cask Strength. Retail was about $75. Again, it just hasn't hit the market here in Southern California. I've been keeping an eye out literally every day. I have an alert set up on some of my favorite whiskey buying websites, and none of my local shops have gotten this in stock yet. But I will say, from tasting it, it's incredible. I think this is a well-deserved win. Some people say it could be marketing since this is a first release of this product. Could be, maybe, but I didn't see Larceny Barrel Proof or Bernheim Barrel Proof winning similar awards when those first came out. So I just think it's a solid American whiskey, and congratulations to the folks at Heaven Hill. I hope to own a bottle in the near future. All right, just two quick notes of gaming news. The first of which is a major update for Civilization 7. If you don't know, I love playing games like Civ. It's just always been one of my favorites, and they just announced a major update to the game that includes some free DLC. So if you've been playing Civ 7, they're rolling out update 1.3.1. Now, this update also includes a free set of expansion called the Tides of Power Collection. You can claim it for free all the way up till January 5th, 2026, as long as you are a owner of Civilization 7. So definitely grab this free DLC while you can. But it's just their way of saying thank you as they roll out this pretty major update. First of which, they're adding a new map called the Shattered Seas map type. They say it plays like a combination of the Pangea and Archipelago map types, consisting of large islands separated by shallow water. They're also doing some major improvements to the different biomes across the land, and doing a strategic balance pass across different types of civilization just to balance out the gameplay a bit more. Now, there's a long list of feature updates, but across the board, they're updated the AI systems for the computer players. Diplomacy has now been improved. Environment titles are now more clearly labeled, and some of the economy bonuses have been fleshed out and improved. If you want to see the full list of details, you can go to civilization.2k.com and see the full devlog there. But I just thought it was cool that they're rolling out some free DLC with this update, as well as some pretty significant improvements to the game. So I actually can't wait to launch it up and see those new additions, maybe right after recording this podcast. I don't know. We've been doing so much Twitch streams lately from the Bourbon Bytes community. We've been playing Peak. We've been playing RV There Yet. If you've not caught those streams, make sure you follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Bourbon Bytes. I go live most weeknights, at least it's been that way since last week, playing with some friends, whether I'm playing those games or I'm doing some solo play in games like Civilization, or I'm playing something like Dispatch, which I've been streaming a little bit of over on Twitch. So make sure to follow me there. I don't have a set schedule, but if you follow, you should get a notification of when I'm going live. So I'm trying to keep the gaming streams on Twitch for now. Might eventually move them back over to YouTube. I actually was talking about this with Pat from Bourbon Noob and Fred and Alfonso, just trying to see if people on YouTube would be interested in the gaming aspect. I know it's a big part of the channel, but I know a lot of people are just there for the whiskey. So still figuring that out. We're running through some ideas, but if you have some opinions on it, please let me know. You can send me an email, contact@bourbonbytes.com. If you want to keep it private, send me a DM on Instagram @bourbonbytes. Or if you feel public about your opinion, you can always join our Whiskey and Gaming Lounge Discord server and let me know your thoughts if you want to hear more video game stuff on the YouTube channel, or you want to keep it strictly to Twitch and the occasional mention on the podcast. Let me know. All right, well, even though we're still towards the end of the year, there are still new games coming out. Two big releases hit the market this week, one of which is Metroid Prime 4 Beyond for the Switch 2, which came out on December 4th, and Microsoft Flight Simulator, which just came out on PlayStation 5 on December 8th. And I saw an ad for the new Hawkins Stranger Things DLC that I don't know if it comes with it for free or if it's an add-on, but it looks incredible. I'm a huge fan of Stranger Things. I'm loving season 5 so far. Just got caught up a couple nights ago, but they're adding the world of Hawkins to Flight Simulator. I'm hoping they bring it to PC as well. I haven't seen anything. It seems to be a PS5 exclusive for now, but you can literally fly over the world of Hawkins. You can land, you can walk around. It's got a lot of iconic landmarks from the series built into this pack for Microsoft Flight Simulator. So if you already have that game or if you're looking at that game, definitely check out the Stranger Things content pack. Now, there's also a ton of new games coming out in Q1 of 2026, but this podcast episode's already running a little long, so we'll save that for a future episode. I think it's time we get into our bite-sized review. All right, well, this whiskey is actually one of two that were sent to me by the kind folks over at Copperworks Distilling out of Seattle. I previously did a live stream with their president and co-founder, and they have new releases that they are excited to share. I'm going to go ahead and review one of these on today's podcast, but stay tuned to next week because there is a second new release from Copperworks that I'm just as excited about. So today we are going to be reviewing the Copperworks Kilt Lifter Whiskey. What a name, right? I love whiskeys with fun names. Well, this one is not just a fun name, it is an amazing story of collaboration. So as I mentioned, Jason Parker, who I've interviewed on my YouTube channel a few weeks back, he actually started out in brewing. He started at Pike Brewing Company back in 1989. They're in the Pike Place Market, which is one of the most iconic tourist locations in Seattle, but he was their first brewer as well. Now, if you notice, 1989 was well before the craft beer boom. We always credit the Northwest for kind of starting that. Well, this was even before that was even taking off. It was one of the first microbreweries in Seattle, and there was very few of them across the country at that time. But then, nearly 25 years later, he opened the Copperworks Distilling Company with his co-founder just down the street from Pike Brewing. It's actually still on the Seattle waterfront. Funny enough, I just stumbled across it when I was in Seattle and was like, oh yeah, I'm going to have a stream with them in a couple weeks. I posted those photos on Instagram of getting a chance to try some of their whiskeys in their tasting room, but we also tried some of their core lineup and special releases on the live stream. So go check out that replay, youtube.com/Bourbon Bytes. But here's where this release is really cool. So 5 years ago, Copperworks teamed up with Pike Brewing and took an unhopped version of their Kilt Lifter Scotch style ale, which is one that Parker helped develop during his time at Pike Brewing. So you see where we're going with this. They then brewed the base of this whiskey using the same techniques that Pike Brewing uses. They even actually used their gravity-fed First Avenue brew house to make this mash, and then distilled it and aged it for 5 years in new American oak casks, thus resulting in the Pike Kilt Lifter Whiskey. They say that this honors a legacy of innovation, friendship, and craft that spans more than 3 decades. So that's incredible. Listen, I love the fact that Copperworks has always been brewers become distillers, but what an amazing way to pay tribute to your legacy, your past, taking this beer that you helped develop, then distilling it and aging it. It's just a incredible testament to the power of craft brewing and craft distilling, especially in the Pacific Northwest, where we see a lot of it. So I'm very, very excited to be one of the first to try this Kilt Lifter whiskey. It was announced back in November. It went on sale for Black Friday, but they were generous enough to send a sample for me to review. By the way, this one comes in a 700 milliliter bottle, bottled at 100 proof, and is about $60 MSRP, with a total of 1,800 bottles released. And as with all Copperworks products, at least to date, this is an American Single Malt whiskey. Let's give this a nose. Ooh, that is very tree-like. Sorry, I wasn't expecting such a pine tree influence on this whiskey. It's almost like a gin, just not nearly what I expected on the nose. Now I want to look into this Kilt Lifter Scotch-style ale. Let me see what tasting notes they give the beer itself. Maybe some of these are a reflection of that. Interesting. They describe this as a medium-bodied Scotch ale, amber in color, with toffee, caramel, and toast notes. Definitely not that pine influence I'm getting on the nose. But I will say, looking at the press release, they do note pine as the most dominant nosing note. So I guess I'm not crazy. I just was very thrown off. I wasn't expecting so much of that flavor. It's almost like I said, a gin, like the juniper quality of a gin. I don't mind juniper, but I prefer other flavors to kind of lead and then the juniper come on the backbone. But this is first and foremost that bit of juniper pine tree kind of note. Another way to describe it maybe is more of like a younger green wood, like a bit of a sour wood on the nose. Really unlike any whiskey I've ever had before. And even coming from Copperworks, I'm a big fan of some of their other releases. This is very, very different. They even have some peated ones that I think are less earthy or of the earth than this, because this is so, it puts me right in nature, I'll just say. All right, well, I have a feeling that the palate's going to bring out more to this whiskey, so let's go ahead and give it a try. Oh, there we go. There's the complexity. I was getting a little worried on that nose because that was such an intense tree-like note. But on the palate, it's really dynamic and really complex. You do get a little bit of that floral aspect, but it's not nearly as piney as the nose is. Really, the malt is what's driving the flavor here. It's got a little bit of like a, kind of like an oatmeal note as well. Maybe a little bit of like cinnamon with that oatmeal, but not really sweet. It's not like cinnamon sugar. It's like cinnamon and butter in your oatmeal. It's kind of what I would describe this palate. It does have some brightness, but it's more of like a white flower, like floral brightness than a sweeter, syrupy brightness to me. And finish-wise, I mean, this thing goes on and on and on. It's almost sweeter on the finish than it is on the palate. It kind of reminds me of like Cinnabon, a little bit of like a cinnamon bun dessert pastry. That is a really unique, really delicious American single malt whiskey, unlike anything I've had before. Honestly, if I would have just left it at the nose, I may not have been as impressed with this, but I'm glad I gave it a try because as someone that's sensitive to some of those juniper pine notes that I don't typically like on some gins, it quickly moves away from those on the palate and you get such a beautiful bouquet of flavors from the white flower brightness to, like I said, the little bit of cinnamon, oatmeal, but then on the finish, more like a cinnamon bun. Just a great whiskey experience. And I love a whiskey that takes you on a journey, not just through their story, but the whiskey itself. And this is no exception. It's time to give this a rating. I give my ratings out of 10. I combine everything from nose to palate to finish to price. Gladly, I don't just rank them individually, or else the nose on this to me wouldn't hit a high score just based on my preferences. But overall, as a package, for a $60 100 proof American single malt whiskey at 5 years old, this one gets a solid 9 out of 10. And I'm really surprised to say that. It's really one of the most interesting tasting whiskeys I've had all year, and it came in just in time because I'm about to compile my top 10 whiskeys of 2025. And if you've been following my list for the past few years, you know I love wacky, fun, unique whiskeys. And this one makes that mark. I'm very excited to potentially include this on my top 10 of the year. No guarantees, but something about this flavor profile just stands out. It holds its own. It's immediately recognizable. And when you combine it with the story behind it, the history, the personal commitment and dedication, it really just stands out and shines above a lot of other whiskeys I've reviewed on this podcast. So well done to the folks at Copperworks. Like I said, they sent me one other whiskey, which is their Arete Tequila Cask Finish that I'm very excited to review. I'll review that next week's podcast. But I did want to focus on this one first because I love the story behind it. I love the people behind it. And boy, am I surprised by this one. So I can't wait till next week to try the tequila cask. But I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thank you all so much for listening. Reminder, you can leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast platform. I know Apple Podcasts and Spotify let you leave a rating. Please do. It really does help raise my rankings when people are searching for bourbon or whiskey podcasts. Seeing your reviews and seeing a highly rated podcast could make the difference between someone clicking on my podcast and someone clicking on maybe another podcast that might not be so great. I don't know. I mean, there's probably plenty of better ones out there, but stay with me. All right. This has been Bourbon Bytes, a whiskey podcast with a gaming twist. Cheers, and I'll talk to you guys next week.